Good morning, Williams Yaxley, and welcome to another assembly. I thought that I would bring you into church for an assembly today because I've not been able to do that for a while because we've been having building work done, and you've not been able to come into church for a while for a whole host of reasons, mainly around the pandemic. And so the church is quiet this morning. We've got no builders in here. There are some people outside cutting the grass, so you might hear that. But I thought I'd bring you into church to talk about something very special with you, because in our church we hold lots of really special things. It was lovely to join you for your special mentions assembly just before half term, and I'm really sorry that I couldn't join you for your Remembrance assembly last week. I would have loved to have been there, so well done to all those that took part in that. And we also take part in Remembrance as a church. It's a very special thing that we do. Some of you may have been here on Sunday at our Remembrance service at 3 o'clock, because we had rainbows and brownies and cubs and scouts and benchers and our training corps as well in church, along with our British Legion and many other people who come once a year into church to commemorate all those, particularly from this village, who went to war and didn't come back. Now, some of you may not have seen around church since you started at Williams Yaxley. I can't remember if I've done a tour. I don't think I have. So I thought I'd give you a little tour to start with. And so we're going to start by our main door. There we go, behind me. Not very exciting. But when you come in our main door, you come to our welcome desk. And it's really important in church that we welcome people, because we love having people in church of all ages, all colours. We don't mind. We just love people coming in and worshipping with us and being part of our church family. And that desk also has our church logo on it, which is somebody's arms outstretched. And we talk about, as a church, we want to reach out in faith and in love. So we go down the church a little bit more. You can see a little bit of our building works, but I'll talk about that in a little while. And you can see there are all the seats that people sit in on a Sunday, and they're called pews in a church. So we come up to the top of church, and this is where a lot of the things happen. We have a stage area, which we call a dais. We've got a beautiful eagle lectern, which is where people read from or pray from, or different things happen there. And this is our table or our altar. It's a place where we celebrate communion. When we have communion, we remember the body and blood of Jesus on the cross. And we remember what he did for us, and that he told us to do this in remembrance of him. So we have the bread and the wine, and we share that at our services. Now you'll also see on the table there is a very special cloth at the moment. Can you spot the poppies? Not too hard to do. So we have special cloths for different times of year that we put on with different colours, sometimes with different patterns, depending on what's going on. And at the moment, we're in that season of remembrance, like we talked about and like you did in your assembly last week. We've also got some amazing people that do some very beautiful displays. And that's one of them there. And if we come up to here, you can see all those poppies, because we wear poppies, don't we, at remembrance time. Sometimes we wear a red one to think about how they were fighting in those fields that had so many poppies in them. Sometimes we wear white ones to think about peace. And there are purple ones as well that remember all the animals that were used in war and was so important. Now, just coming up right up to the top of church, and we've got our second altar or table there, and then we've got a beautiful screen behind it, and we've got our amazing window. I love this window. You probably can't see it too well because the sun is streaming through it. And we also have, and I don't think you'll be able to see these too well. There you go. We've got a couple of flags, and they're the Royal British Legion flags. Now, you may know we've got a British Legion in Yaxley, And the British Legion this year are 100 years old. The British Legion was set up in 1921 to support people who were coming back from wars, coming back to support those who had lost a lot of their lives during the war in different ways, because sometimes people come back with injuries, sometimes people have seen some really awful things and find that so difficult to get over. And sometimes as well, people who had someone who went to fight even, need that support. So the British Legion was set up 100 years ago and is still going today and is still doing an amazing job of helping people who have suffered through war in a variety of ways. I'm not going to show you that chapel because it's full of all our stuff from the building work at the moment, so it doesn't look very nice. But if I come over here, we've got something very special in church. And the light is not helping me coming through the windows. So I'm going to go a little bit closer. And that's our board of remembrance. So if you were involved in the service on Sunday, you may well have gone up to the War Memorial first in the cemetery. You may have gone and they read the names and laid wreaths around that memorial. And then what happens is they come into church. And we do different things in the service. We sing, we pray, we say some words, pledging to live for peace. But people also come and they read the names off the board in the service. So, that very top board is the names of all those people who fought in the First World War. So between 1914 and 1918, over 100 years ago now. But they're all the people who went from Yaxley, but they didn't come home. They were killed in war. And the board that you can see better behind me at the moment is the board from the Second World War. So between 1939 and 1945, all those people again who were killed during the Second World War from Yaxley who didn't come back. Now, you need to remember that these boards are all over the country. And every town and every village and every city on the whole has a board like this with names of people who died during the World Wars. Now, I've actually been a vicar in some parishes which are called thankful villages because they were so fortunate that nobody from their village, when they went to war, died. They all came back. And so we used to have a different kind of a service sometimes on Remembrance Sunday, being thankful that nobody died. But as you can see here, there are quite a few names of people from Yaxley who died in the First and Second World Wars. And I'm going to lift it right up. You may have seen this at the beginning, just to see what's right at the top of this. And I don't know if you can see that figure of Jesus there, looking down on all these names. And we think about when Jesus went to the cross and why he did that. And we remember that he did that because he loves each one of us so much. And these people with the names that you can see on the board behind me went to war in service and love of their country and to try and preserve the freedom that we are fortunate to have today. It's really hard to imagine what that was like because I've never lived through a big conflict like the First or Second World War. I've known the Falklands War and the Gulf War, but they seem very far removed from here, if you like. They didn't happen in this country, although our own forces went to fight. Now, some of you will be people that know about people in the forces very well. Some of you will have loved ones in the forces, and some of you may even have people working at the local bases. And it's so important we remember those people that still serve our country today in the Army, in the Air Force and in the Navy. Because they're still giving their lives in service of us, essentially, and trying to protect freedom. Now, our value this term is tolerance. And we've been talking about how important tolerance is in thinking about how we use all our hearts and do things with all our hearts to love everybody, Because sometimes we find some people a little bit difficult to love. Sometimes maybe we don't agree with what they're saying, we have a different point of view. And sometimes we have to learn to love that person, to get on with that person and be tolerant. But wars also teach us that sometimes we need to not be tolerant. And this is very difficult because it's very hard sometimes to know where the line is. And so we know that some of these wars happened because people realised that things going on in the world weren't right or just. And so they had to go to war to fight against something that they felt was wrong. So if we think about the Second World War and all the awful things that happened during the Second World War, we know that in Germany they were trying to make people really of one kind. I love the fact that we live in a world where people are different sizes and shapes and ages and colours and come with different viewpoints. But sometimes people will have ideas that are trying to go against that are trying to get rid of people of certain colours or religions, and there's some of that still going on in the world today, and it's so sad. But there are times not to show tolerance, and that's why some of these world wars happened, or some of the wars happened, because we realised, or other people, or other countries realised, that things that were happening were not right, and so we had to fight against those things. Now, hopefully you and I will never have to go to actual physical battle, but sometimes we have to speak out against things that are wrong. We can think about the COP26 conference that went on, where people wanted to speak out because they could see that what was going on was wrong. What's happening in our world is wrong. People are not taking care of the beautiful world that God created. And often those that are the poorest in the poorest countries were suffering the most because their countries were getting underwater, they were suffering from extreme heat and conditions. And so people went to that conference trying to speak out and say we need to do something different. Now, not all wars happen for good reasons, I can't say that they do, but sometimes they happen because we need to fight against bad things. So it's really hard where we need to show. It's really hard, to learn where we need to show tolerance, because sometimes we need to learn to love people for who they are, but sometimes we need to realise that something that's being spoken about is actually wrong. So how do we know where that line is? Well, let's go back to thinking about our values and where we come from. And our logo is our heart, our William de Yaxley heart. And we have our verse about doing everything in love. And we have our motto, with all our hearts. So it changes things when we think about loving people. And we have to think, when we love people, about, are we just struggling because their viewpoint's a bit different to ours? Or are we struggling because something that they're saying is actually really wrong? Because it's against other people, it's not showing love. And so love is often a very good place to start with when we're trying to assess and think about, are we tolerant because we need to love this person, or do we need to not show tolerance? And it's really hard, and it's something that you and I will be learning for the rest of our lives, when we need to speak up, or when we need to learn to change ourselves maybe, and to learn to love somebody that maybe has some different viewpoints. There's a verse in the Bible from the Gospel of John, and it says, no one has greater love than someone who lays down their life for a friend. Now, it's a verse that was particularly talking about Jesus because it was written just before Jesus went to the cross. And we know that Jesus went to the cross because he loves us so much. But also I use it at Remembrance at this time of year to remind us that all these people, and so many more around the country, went to war because they wanted to show love for their country and love for people and love for freedom. And they wanted to show that what some people were doing was wrong. So no one has greater love than someone who lays down their life for a friend. So we think about that in relation to Jesus going to the cross, but there are also people who lay down their lives for people. And you may have heard about that terror attack in Liverpool, I think it was this week, where that taxi driver was really brave and locked that person in their taxi. And so people do things with real bravery at times, and because they love and people and don't want to see things happening to others. Now you may have well have worn a poppy. There are lots of poppy wreaths around that. I wear a big poppy at our Remembrance service to remind us of all those who went to war. I've got lots of other different things. So I've got that one, which says thank you. And it was a pin from 3 years ago in 2018. And it reminds us that we were 100 years on from the end of the First World War. And it says thank you, all who served, sacrificed and changed our world. Oh, I'm trying to find the front of that. I wear that pin, it's a bit hard to see, sorry. Because it's a cross of poppies with a soldier's helmet on it. And it reminds me of the cross where Jesus laid down his life for me, but also of the poppies where so many people laid down their lives for me as well by serving in the army or the forces or the navy or in many different ways. Some people weren't in forces, but they served in this country, doing many different things, doing land guards, stepping into some of those jobs that needs to be done. That, I think, again, was from about 3 years ago, and it's a silhouette of a soldier. If you go up to our war memorial in Yaxley, you will see a silhouette as well, a bigger silhouette, but I wore that then. We've got poppies that I wear every year. I'm just trying to find this year's one. So that's this year's one that I have been wearing this year in 2021. So as we look at this memorial, we can remember what people did. This is a season of remembrance in the church. We remember people who have died, that people loved. We remember people that went to war. And so this is a really important time. And it's really important to think about this as we think about tolerance and how we show that and where we don't show that as well. So we're going to just have a moment of quiet because I've told you many different things. And you might need to think about some of that. So let's have a moment of quiet and then I will pray. Loving God, as I sit in our church at St. Peter's, as I look at the war memorial above my head, I think of all those many people who went to war and didn't come back. I think about all those people who gave their life for me. And I give thanks for each one of those names on the board. And we think about those who went to war and did come back and of all they saw. And we pray for them today and thank you for the memory that they hold of their friends and their colleagues who they went to war with. Father, we pray for our armed forces today, for the Army, for the Navy, for the Air Force, for those that serve in so many different ways. And we thank you for the British Legion, who support those who struggle due to the effects of war. Be with all those who try to help those who have gone to war for ours and others' safety. Amen. Well, I said I would tell you about our building work, and I can now show you our building work. It's not quite complete, but we are very nearly there. So behind me, you can see we have a whole new room upstairs. We have a whole new kitchen area. And we have more toilets. I won't show you those because that's not very exciting. And so hopefully in the not too distant future, you'll be able to come into church and actually see these for yourself. But let's just take a moment to think about that war memorial and what that means, and to think about tolerance and how we can show that in our lives today. Take care and God bless you, and Yaxley, I will see you soon. Bye.